our special guest in the next session. I just heard this is his first time to Dubai. So that's always quite interesting. How do you see this city? How do you see this country? And of course, I know that a lot of people are attending over the course of many years. You're seeing a lot of change. Of course, there's a lot of change across the world, but there's something in particular about this country and this city where there's an accelerated change. So I hope you're enjoying it and having a chance to connect as well. So I'm just going to double check. Yes. The gentlemen behind me have done all the stage directions. So without further ado, allow me to please introduce the next section. We have how VCs are building AI to modernize investing. You saw Josh Constine, who's from SignalFire, Editor-in-Chief, TechCrunch US in the last session, so I'm going to welcome him back on stage. And he's going to be our moderator for this session with Ilya Kirnos, who is a CTO of SignalFire. You may remember him from yesterday. So this is a really lovely way for us to add a sense of familiarity, gentlemen. And may I just begin by saying, Ilya, you were saying this is your first time in Dubai.
It is my first time. It's been a lot of fun to meet a lot of the participants in the ecosystem. I was just met a lot of local investors, a lot of local founders, and LPs as well. It's been a lot of fun.
Fantastic. Great to get that insight. I give it over to you for your very capable hands. Give them a very warm round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we're going to have a really interesting talk right now about how VCs are actually applying AI. We just got done talking about investing in AI, but what are venture funds doing to improve their own selection process for startups, as well as help their portfolio companies by using AI in-house? So Ilya, maybe you could just start off by giving us a quick overview of the history of how AI has worked in the venture capital industry.
Yeah, so SignalFire is about 10 years old. We started in 2013, and back in 2013, it was controversial to say you're going to be using AI and software in venture capital, which to us seemed very ironic and kind of crazy. As VCs, we invest in all these companies that are using technology and data to transform their verticals, their industries, and yet venture capital itself historically has been quite tech deficient. And so we started out in 2013, set out to change that, and back then it was quite controversial. I think if you fast forward 10 years, it's flipped 180 degrees. I think today, basically, if you're not at least claiming to be using some data in your investing, you seem like you're antiquated and out of touch in kind of Silicon Valley in the US. And it's really the degree of sophistication of using AI and data that kind of is now the separation between all the firms.
Right, so it used to be, oh, do you or do you not use data? And now everyone says they use data, but how are you actually doing it? Is it in a sophisticated way? Have you actually refined that model, or are you just using some sort of off-the-shelf LLM technology? So maybe you could tell me, like, you built this technology, but what were you doing before SignalFire, and then how did you come up with the idea of how you could specifically help investors find great companies with AI?
Yeah, so my personal background is in software engineering, both by educational background and professional experience. I was a computer science and math undergrad major, came out to Silicon Valley right after graduation in 1999. I began my career in the database group at Oracle, and then after a few years there, in 2003, moved over to Google and worked at Google from 2003 to 2012. And during that time, I worked on several projects. The main ones were AdWords early on, infrastructure, and then Gmail and Gmail monetization. And it was really on Gmail that I saw the power of using machine learning for processing unstructured data. If you think about what the data is flowing through Gmail in emails, it's largely unstructured. It may be personal emails that are free-form text. It may be semi-structured data, maybe like a travel receipt. You just booked a flight to Dubai. Maybe we want to show you an ad for a hotel in Dubai, right? So that was our task, was to infer purchase intent from lots and lots of unstructured data. It translates quite directly to what we do at SignalFire today. A lot of the data that we work with at the firm is highly unstructured, complex data. And that's the DNA of our technical team. I'm from Google. We have PhDs in natural language processing from places like Stanford on the team. We have particle physicists on the team. So it's really specialized expertise to be able to process this kind of data and derive insights from it.
So it feels like there's suddenly all of these people claiming to do AI, but it's not that sophisticated. What is the difference between a really sophisticated use of AI for venture and a kind of surface level usage?
Yeah, what I would say is lots of firms are, of course, using data in the sense of what you mentioned, maybe paying for vendors, getting data from Bloomberg or PitchBook or whatever it might be. In our case, we built a system from the ground up because we thought it was very important for us to be able to capture the feedback loops from our data and feed them back into our machine learning models. If you're paying for a vendor and you're using Bloomberg, for example, their models do not get better from your usage of them and from you saying, I like this company and I don't like this one, and then the next time around it gives you better recommendations. That does not happen. That is the system that we've built. The other thing that I would say we do is all the power is in bringing this data together into one place. If you have 6 browser tabs open, one with PitchBook, one with App AnyData, one with SimilarWeb, that is not sufficient to be able to answer all the questions that we have as investors. You know, a lot of firms will start with App Store data because it's quite structured. You can see an app, and you can see its daily app ranks, for example. And you can do time series analysis and see what's rising, what's falling. Well, guess what? There are millions of apps in the App Store, and something's always rising, something's always falling. And if you have an app that's shooting up the App Store rankings, as investors, you immediately have lots and lots of follow-up questions. For example, how much money has this app raised? How good's the team behind it? What is its business model? Is it ad supported or is it transactional? How much? Where is it based? So those 4 simple questions mean that you have to bring in probably dozens and dozens of disparate data sets all into one place to be able to, in an automated fashion, answer all those questions. And that's impossible to do if you're just stitching vendors together. And so that's why we had to build a system from the ground up to bring all this data together into one place, because all the power's in the join. And then we're able to build feedback loops because we're seeing the usage of the app full stack in our data, and we can go all the way back to the model to improve it.
So assessing the talent of an engineer or a potential founder is so subjective. You know, some quantitative signals might not be able to tell it alone. So how did you actually train that model over the last decade to understand this person is going to be a better cybersecurity founder than this one, or this is going to be the exact person that if a company's hiring this quality of talent, I'm going to want to invest in them? You know, how do you actually tell apart a good from a great engineer or a good from a great founder?
Right. Of course, everything starts with data. And so we've built, you can almost think of it like a mini Google, where we go out and ingest lots and lots of data. A lot of it is public. For example, we try to get as many resumes as we can. Some of this data is not public. We buy it. And so we'll ingest all the resume data we can find. We'll ingest data on patents, academic publications, open source contributions. If you're a data scientist and you're competing on websites like Kaggle, that's like an open source data science challenge contest website. If you rank highly on that, we bring that data in and we join it to our data set. And then once you have all this data in one place, you can start doing analytics. And we think of it as sort of looking at different signals. For example, the quality of your work experience, or the quality of your academic publications, or the quality of your patents, or your open source contributions. And to give you a little bit of an intuition for example, how we look at work. You know, usually when you look at a resume, you'll typically sort of look at the history of where the person has worked, kind of which companies and the times during which that person worked there. The time window really matters quite a bit, because if I think back to my career at Google when I sort of joined in 2003, our top competitor was Yahoo. And that was a top company in the Valley, had a great team. It was a hard place to get hired into. And so working at Yahoo in 2003 was a great signal. That meant you were a top engineer. If you fast forward 20 years, Yahoo is not a top tech company anymore. It's sort of a shadow of its former self. And so you have to take timing into account. So working at Yahoo today.
I can attest to that. AOL got bought by Yahoo. TechCrunch was bought by AOL. I worked for Yahoo. It wasn't the best place for tech talent.
No offense. And so you have to take that into account. Of course, there are so many companies and they're changing all the time and they're fluctuating. No surprise you can't do this manually. We take a machine learned approach that is inspired by Google's PageRank. And so we analyze the graph of talent movement between companies to help us understand what were the top companies and if you worked there during that time. And once you get to that company, you can observe what happens. For example, If you end up leaving after 3 months and you keep job hopping, it's not a great signal, right? So you get penalized for that. If you stay at the company, you get promoted rapidly, that's a great signal. And the more senior you get, the more rapidly promoted you get, the better, and the more bonus points effectively you get. And so that's an example of kind of what we look at.
So we've also seen some pretty disingenuous uses of AI for venture capital. For instance, like I've heard stories of venture funds that are using AI to generate outreach to thousands of founders and are basically just spamming founders, taking up their time rather than doing their homework up front, being like, hey, we just wanted to check in. Can you send us your latest deck? And they're basically just trying to like suck data out of those startups and waste those founders' time. What are some of the other like no-goes, things that you really don't want to see venture capitalists doing with AI?
You know, it's interesting. I mean, we've seen some of these uses in firms where one of the signals they look at is kind of who else is in the investor syndicate, right? They're almost afraid to make their own independent decision, and they're looking for other investors to commit first before they commit to the round. And that leads to all kinds of weird incentives and kind of gamesmanship that leads to, for example, firms saying, hey, I would love to invest, but we need this other investor to commit first. And encouraging founders to go talk to other investors first. And the founders are very confused about this. They're like, well, if you like my company and you want to invest, why are you telling me to go talk to other investors? Shouldn't you be just writing a check and giving me a term sheet? So those are some examples where I think AI is sort of misused in our industry, and there's a misalignment of incentives.
So while we hear a lot about venture capitalists starting to try to use data for their investing practice, that often leaves out the portfolio companies, which I think is almost a more exciting use case, because if you can really help those companies by using AI for things like recruiting, they're going to want to take your capital. And I think we're in the age of the smart founder and the smart money, where you can't just VCs don't have all the power anymore. Venture capital and dollars invested doubled between 2020 and 2021. There's so much capital flowing through the industry that VCs really have to compete on how they help startups. So how are you at SignalFire actually using AI to help the portfolio companies, not just your own team?
Yeah, that's a great question. And in fact, if you sort of made me choose one area where we could apply AI, and it had to be one, it would be that. It wouldn't be in sourcing and helping identify companies. It would be in helping support our companies post-investment. And so the areas where we help our companies using software and data are, number one, in recruiting. That tends to be pain point number 1, 2, and 3 for a lot of our companies, especially technical recruiting. And that's where we can really put our data to work to help our companies identify the best talent and the talent that's in market, so they don't waste their time reaching out to people who are not really actionable, who are not looking. The other place where we help our founders is in go-to-market, using our data to help them identify prospects. For instance, if let's say you're a data science platform company, we can help you identify companies that have rapidly growing data science teams, right? So that would be a great prospect for you to potentially sell into. Or for example, if there is a company that just hired a new head of data science, and that would stand to reason that they're looking for new tools to bring into the organization, that is in our data. We can help you surface those insights, and that's what we do for a lot of our companies dozens of times every week.
So now with all these new LLM technologies coming out, how are you integrating those to consistently make the AI more efficient for your teams, your portfolio companies, as well as the investment team?
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting. LLMs, as I'm sure everyone knows, are a generative AI model, right? So they help generate kind of the next word in a sentence. In our case, a lot of our AI use cases are in predictive AI. We're trying to predict which candidates will be in market. We're trying to predict which companies will do well. And so the places where we use LLMs are actually for subtasks, not for the main task. Places where LLMs have been quite helpful for us are in some of these natural language tasks. For example, one of the things we have to do is looking at somebody's title on their resume, try to figure out what kind of engineer they are, or if they are an engineer. And so there is a wide variety of titles and ways people describe what they do. You can be a code ninja, right? And so what is a code ninja? Well, it's probably a software engineer, but it's hard for ML to know that. Well, these LLMs are really good at that. And so that's really helped us on that task. So identifying from your resume, kind of classifying you into a role, and then we can match you into our portfolio into their open job specs, for example. So those are some of the places where we're using LLMs.
Awesome. So to recap, it sounds like 10 years ago, the industry was very skeptical about using AI. It seemed like it just wasn't powerful enough to do it. But over a decade of building your own data pools, refining it with constant user feedback of saying this engineer is better than this engineer, this founder is higher potential than this founder, you can actually train the model with your own data set to be able to predict which companies not you should invest in, but that you can actually reach out to and at least talk to find out what their story is. And then you can also apply it to help them with the recruiting as well as their go-to-market efforts to help them find the best people for any given role, as well as finding the exact person that they want to sell to. And while there's some people trying to use AI to automate outreach to founders or tell them who to invest in just because another investor already funded a company, you're really trying to use it to make your own proprietary decisions on who is the next big thing. And then what's coming next is integrating these LLMs to summarize companies to make it easier for for investors to understand what they do, so they can more quickly pull together all the data they need to make a decision. And if that stuff all sounds helpful to you, I think SignalFire would love to hear about what you startups are building. We write lead checks, seed to Series B. We focus on infrastructure like cybersecurity, healthcare, developer tools, and enterprise. And we have an NPS of 85, which you're not going to find amongst a lot of venture funds. Most venture funds are probably a little bit scared to actually ask their founders what they think of them. And I love that SignalFire takes the founder testimonial as the most important part of what it's doing. So any last words for anyone trying to think about how to use AI for VC?
Let's see. Look, I think it requires a lot of commitment. It's a lot of hard work. Like any startup that's trying to apply data and AI to their space, there was a lot of good questions in the last session around, if I'm just starting out, how do I bootstrap my way to getting lots and lots of data, which is, there's no AI without data. We had to solve all those challenges. They're all great questions. In many ways, we're built like a startup ourselves, and we're built like the companies we fund. And I couldn't have said it better myself, Josh. We love very technical founders, love technical companies, and would love to talk to any founders in the audience.
Yeah, and we love making relationships here in the region. Thank you all for being so welcoming to us. And if you'd like to chat, we'll be around after the talk. So thank you so much for having us, and thank you to GITEX Expand Northstar. Farewell.
Thank you.